Hi, everybody. Chris Bobe here with the Wisdom Through Bitcoin podcast. Once again, I have with me two exciting people that I got to meet earlier in the year, James and Nicki down in El Salvador. This is going to be a special interview. These are two really great people who have a really great Bitcoin onboarding story and are really living the Bitcoin dream. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic off to Nicki and James to kind of give you a little bit of background about themselves and tell you their Bitcoin orange pill story.
Great. Hey, thanks,
Wow.
Chris.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
yeah.
So enjoy telling our story and talking about what it's like down here. So yeah, no, thank you.
I think it's funny that you posted as the Bitcoin dream, because one of the things that I say, like, I've actually been in Bitcoin since 2012, and you've got two extremes sitting here in front of you. And I remember the days where it's like, imagine the day a country adopts Bitcoin. And it happened. And so how could I not come?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd almost think there'd be more countries by this point.
At least there's one.
Yeah,
So
at least there's one.
At
That's
least
right.
there's one, so we can go from there.
All right. Where do we start?
Do you want to start this time?
Me this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to know how I got in quite early, and it was not because of Bitcoin as such, or what happened was I was quite interested in gold and silver. So I come from an entrepreneurial family. Like my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather were all entrepreneurs in New Zealand. And so there was a certain kind of thinking that came along with that. And I wanted to understand how to build wealth and maintain wealth and preserve wealth for myself and my future, because it's also important for people to be wanting to build a retirement, and so they can live comfortably in the future. I ended up becoming a gold and a silver bug because that seemed like a really logical path, which I think is quite common for a lot of people when they're looking for that wealth preservation sort of system. And then one day, so growing up in the family business, I ended up being a bit of a computer nerd. I had access to a computer at a young age. So I was happy with computers, happy with the concept of money and how these things worked. I'd asked a lot of questions. Bitcoin came along. My brother flicked me a Reddit post and said, oh, look, Bitcoin just went to $50 US. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I had a bit of a read, and I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot like digital gold. I'm interested. So I went and downloaded the client, and it was like a gig of blockchain. And I'm like, oh man, that's too big, and shut my laptop, because I didn't have time to sit there and wait for a gig to download.
So you just intuitively figured out that Bitcoin was like a digital gold. Nobody had expressed that idea to you before?
Nope. So growing up on the internet, like, I grew up with like a computer that literally you had to put floppy disks in, and then I got a modem, and then the internet came along. So all of this was kind of intuitive to me, and I was waiting for the day that a digital money came along. And I was also already building websites, so I had a concept of like how web servers worked, databases worked, and then I also understood things like BitTorrent and why that was different to a standard database. So I had this groundwork in front of me, also to do with money, because I was fascinated with trying to build wealth and understand how the monetary system worked and how to put my wealth to work. And so I had all of these puzzle pieces already there. So when I saw Bitcoin, I'm like, how does this solve the problem? And that was what caught my attention, was these guys had a cryptographic way to solve the problem. And so you dig into it, and when you put the time in and you listen to everything you can, especially in those days, you could listen to everything you could. It became quite apparent quite quickly that this was something special.
As you were thinking the problem, what would you say in your mind you felt that the problem was? Was it the SWIFT system and the way the U.S. used currency to gain an advantage in the world, or what was the problem that you felt it solved?
I probably wasn't that deep down the rabbit hole when I got to that. The problem it solved for me at the time was preserving value, which is what gold and silver did. And it was like gold and silver were meant to be rare metals, which was what gave them value. And I'm like, 21 million Bitcoin, and no one can go and change the protocol, because everybody's going to agree, and it's incentivized in a way where there's not a good incentive to increase the number of Bitcoin. all of that made sense to me really quickly. And it was like, oh, if I lose my keys, then the value of my asset actually goes up because those guys lost their keys. Like that game theory worked really quickly for me. I got it. I was like, this makes sense. I like this. I want to play this game.
Now, once you got it and you started to get excited about it, how did the people around you react to that?
Oh, disinterested, just crazy James on one of his crazy internet things. It was, yeah. I mean, I'm an early adopter. I always wanted, like, I had a computer when I was a kid. I had friends that came around. They didn't want to play with me. They wanted to play with the computer.
Sounds like my son and his friends. And what about you, Nikki? How did you get introduced to Bitcoin? Was it through James?
It was through James. Yeah. So James and I met nearly 2 years ago at we both started bachata dancing. And he, on the first night, we sort of started chatting, and I sort of said to him, I said, oh, what are you into? And he goes, oh, Bitcoin. And I said, great, because I come from the financial background. So I was a mortgage, worked for a mortgage company that focused on helping people pay off their mortgage faster. So so they had the opportunity to create a lifestyle they wished to choose. And so so I loved that job. I loved working with clients to actually give them goals, give them or not give them, but help them sort of sit down and go, well, when you're 80 years old and you're sitting in your rocking chair, what kind of lifestyle do you want to have lived? And all of a sudden, for the past 2 years prior to that, our regulations in New Zealand changed when it came to lending money in the finance institution. So our CCCFA laws came in where we were having to not anybody who was interested in getting a mortgage or even refinancing, they already had a mortgage, we were having to analyze their bank accounts so much that we were having to sort of, already they proved that they had enough income to service the debt. But then what we were doing is we had to look at their variable spend, and we were having to document their variable spend on what they were spending on takeouts, what they were spending on petrol, what they were spending on holidays and all this sort of stuff. And that was all of a sudden taking into account going into their variable, taking into account whether they could afford their mortgage or not, even though it was on top of what
their debt to equity ratio was good anyway.
And we had already proved that they could do that. And I was getting really disheartened. So for 2 years, we were having to restudy and relearn all this. And I was going, but this is none of our business. If it's their variable spend, then they should be able to spend it how they wished. But our laws changed, and that was the way it was. And so what was happening was I was having people come to me and showing their incomes. They had to prove 2 years tax summaries. And their tax summaries, I had some clients come in, and they were had invested in Bitcoin, and they had made some money. And they'd obviously sold some. So they showed that they had made some money, and they were paying tax on that. Yet that taxable income wasn't acceptable as income. And so I was getting quite sort of frustrated on the whole thing. So when James said, oh, Bitcoin, I said, sweet, I need to talk to you. I need to find out what this is. So that's kind of how and it did take a couple of months before I actually started buying my first Bitcoin. But to be honest, I bought my first Bitcoin at 69,000.
What was your, I want to come back to that, because that's a very important number in the last cycle here, considering it's the most expensive Bitcoin had ever been, is when you when you started to make your purchases of Bitcoin was at the top.
At the top, yeah.
So what were some of your challenge that you had when James first started to talk to you about Bitcoin? What was some of the hesitations that kept you from initially buying it, that you needed to have some questions answered before you felt comfortable enough that this was a real asset and it was never going to go to zero?
Yeah, it wasn't really. I suppose I did feel it was a little bit like internet magic, magic internet money. I just wasn't sure. I needed to grasp that it was something solid, even though I know it's internet, but I needed to have a little bit more understanding of it. So it was great. James has had the books, so he was, quite happily really letting me read the books, but it was also listening to James and his conversations he was having with other people. And that's sort of what really sold me more than anything, was I could sit and listen to his conversations, and he's so sold. He was so sold on it. It was, I know I had to verify for myself, but I'm thinking, well, here's someone who's been in it for so long and has pretty much got 80% of his wealth in Bitcoin. And so I was like really interested in listening to his conversations and how he was talking with people, how easy it was to orange people in New Zealand, even though, you couldn't really use it in New Zealand as such because of the tax implications.
It's
there.
classified as a capital gains asset.
Yeah. And so, but it was still good to just do that little transaction and see how quick it was happening with the Lightning Network and those sorts of things. But so it did take me, a couple of months before I was willing to go on board. But the great thing is something James will tell anybody who isn't in Bitcoin is, you would spend $100 to learn something. You'd quite happily pay $100 to do an internet course on something. And why not do that with Bitcoin? So spend $100 and go through the process, buy your first Bitcoin and sort of see what that process is all about and what it's like. And so that's what happened was he showed me and got, going through the whole process of getting a password manager, 2FA, all of those things. I mean, I did have 2FA for work, but, just all learning all right from the word go all the way. And then it was quite funny because a couple of weeks later, we started chatting about, how much Bitcoin. I said something about Bitcoin and he's going, how much you got? And of course, once I'd done it once, I was going, right.
We're sitting down on the couch and Nikki's busy checking her app. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm checking my Bitcoin balance. And I'm like, it says $100, isn't it? Like, it must have only gone up or down like a few dollars. And she's like, no.
yeah. And so I had meanwhile gone, right, I have to do this by myself. So that's a typical Nikki thing where I've gone, okay, I've been shown it once. Now I need to be able to do it by myself. So from then on, I just kept buying little bits.
It was over $1,000 in her account. So she'd gone off on her own and started buying by herself to make sure she could do it. And I'm like, are you sure you want to put that much in?
Yeah, isn't that funny? Even though we're all in on the technology, and in a lot of cases we're all in on the financial side, when other people get into it, we think to ourselves, if I lose it all, okay, this is on me. But if I bring somebody else into this space and they accumulate and they're as passionate about it as I am, but if they lose it all too, all of a sudden there's a weight that gets put on you because you were the introduction into it.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons why I for a short period of time in 2007, 2008, I was a financial advisor, and worst time in human history to get into financial planning.
Yeah.
But I realized very quickly that the decisions that I was making and the things that I was talking about with my clients and customers were things that were going to weigh heavily on their future and their future prospects for wealth. And so I love it that in Bitcoin that we really take that to heart, and that becomes like an ethical part of our code on how we talk about the technology and help orange pill others and try to bring them in slowly in a way that the education can keep up with what they're accumulating. Because if the risk that they perceive that they're taking is above what their education level is, they could sell at the wrong time and put themselves in an awfully bad position.
Or even do something silly like lose keys or have
not store it properly, not keep proper track of them.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our process, like I've got a number of processes and I try to analyze what people are looking for, and I try to bring them in a way where it's like the first place I normally start is your personal security, because a lot of people don't have it. Now, I don't even talk about Bitcoin to start with. If they ask me about Bitcoin, it's like, have you got a password manager? And they're like, no, what is that? And it's like, we've got a lot of work to do before you can buy Bitcoin. And so it qualifies them because I need them to take responsibility on a certain level and bring their game up, because they're about to play in a very real environment.
Yeah. So, Nikki, when you got into Bitcoin, what year was that?
2021.
2021. So it was during the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, that's actually a really good segue here to how you guys ended up into El Salvador. So as you started to accumulate Bitcoin and you started to realize that this technology had merit and people were using it, and there was this huge worldly network of people already transacting all over the world of this thing, at what point did you guys realize that the legal process in New Zealand was changing to a point where you were no longer willing to accept living in that type of society, and ended up with that? I'll leave it to you to let us know what you ended up doing.
Yeah.
Can I start?
Yes, you can.
Okay. When the leader of your country says that they are the one and only single source of truth you being a Bitcoiner, I like to have options of where I source my truth from. So there was a massive red flag, and it's just one of a number of things that have happened in the country. Before we left. One of the things that also triggered us to actually set a date and be very serious about what we were choosing to do was when the national carrier, for whatever reason, which is 50% government owned at the time, said that you cannot get on an international flight unless you've basically taken the, you've got all the paperwork to prove that you took the experimental medical procedure. And it was like, that doesn't sound like a good thing to us. And so we would literally, like, it caused rifts between family members and friends, and basically on the grounds of we just want the choice. Like, we don't mind if you guys want to do it or wear your masks and all that stuff, but our choice is being taken away. And that's a bit of a, it's a rub for us. And so we had to pinch ourselves and be like, are we actually having this conversation with people, like our friends and family? And is this actually happening? Like, we honestly we'd checked our sanity.
We were also going, what are we missing? What is it that we're missing here that everyone else, or majority of the rest of the country, understands? We were going, what is it that we don't get?
What? So it was like the mental weight, the social pressure was huge. Like we were basically shut out of all of our social activities. We both had night school. We both did social activities like dance. We both had sporting activities that we did. Nicki's was purely outside in the water. She had, my social activity was to roll around on the floor with guys, but it sounds really bad. But I mean, that's obviously close contact, which is different. But though once we basically had been pushed, we were told we're not welcome at all of our social activities and educational activities in society, that that was a massive red flag for us.
So once that started to happen, how long did it take you to sell all of your assets, find a place you wanted to go? Did you have any other options other than Central America to travel to, and how did you determine what was going to be the right place for you?
Well, initially, before Air New Zealand announced this, we started looking at yachts and going, oh, maybe we can buy a yacht and just take off. But of course, that's not quite as easy as what it sounds, in the sense that New Zealand also has very strict requirements of sailing a boat offshore. So your boat has to be a certain level, you have to have a certain crew, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, and all the Pacific Islands that you would normally sail to were also, you wouldn't be allowed to get to them. So that was one thing that we sort of thought about and tossed up, looked at a few, and then thought, oh no, this is really is too hard. So and then at one point, so you talk about actually like up here, because
so we knew about, I mean, I obviously being a Bitcoiner, I watched the conferences and being locked in your room, you got time to do these things. So, well, not locked, but anyway, I watched the Jack Mallers announcement of El Salvador, and of course that puts it on the map and you start asking questions. And then basically what happened was, during the Bitcoin conference here in El Salvador, they had a problem with Bitcoiners coming because they were being locked out due to the COVID restrictions. This was in 21. And so Bukele basically said to immigration, drop it all. Like, this is, I need the Bitcoiners to come in. And he realized there was a realization that if he was to be serious about attracting Bitcoiners, he was going to have to drop it. And so he did. And that changed the game. So that dropped all the regulations. And that was the reason that El Salvador was an opportunity on the map. So New Zealand was pushing us. El Salvador had adopted Bitcoin and dropped all of the COVID restrictions. And like I said at the start, dreamt of the day that a country would adopt Bitcoin. And it seemed like the universe was giving us the ultimate sort of signal to make a move.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, I remember that during that time, there was a marketing campaign by Bukele to talk about living a healthy lifestyle and getting out, and how sunshine actually kills the virus, and eating lots of fruits and vegetables to boost your immune system is actually the best source to fight the disease, and all that.
Yeah, definitely.
That made sense.
And so so it was Boxing Day, so that's the day after Christmas, and we gave ourselves 5 weeks.
5 weeks to sell it all, put it and to get the cash in a bank into Bitcoin,
Mm.
memorize your seed phrases, and leave.
Yeah.
You know, when I tell people that story and how it's possible to literally keep all of your wealth in your head for the first time in human history, you can do exactly what you did. People think it's crazy. Like not just who would do that, but they don't believe it can actually be done.
Yeah, and that's because nation states would also like you to believe that it can't be done. So there's only so much gold or cash that you're legally allowed to carry across a border, and there's a number of systems. I mean, a metal detector, who's it for? Is it to stop guns and knives, or is it actually to stop people from smuggling gold inside their bodies? I don't know. It's I'm just pulling an extreme example here. I'm not saying that that's the way it is, but there's measures in place to try and keep track of or stop people from transporting more wealth, like certain amount of wealth across borders.
You know, I've been thinking about that from the context of interest rates here in the United States, because 12 months ago, you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage for 2.5%. And now that same fixed mortgage costs a little over 7%. Well, about 6.5% to 7.25%, depending on your lender. And I was thinking about how so many people have now decided that they're not going to move because they can't even fathom letting go of a 2.5% mortgage if it's going to be into something higher. And so they stay put. And you got to kind of wonder about the psyop that's happening about putting these invisible barriers on people's ideas of, you know, what good wealth management is in that context. Kind of what you were saying, James, is like, are they doing it to reduce the money in the system and get ahead of inflation, or are they doing it to also lock people into certain geographic locations so they don't feel like it's beneficial for them to leave?
And I totally agree. And I'd love to apply that to the Bitcoin mentality between New Zealand and El Salvador. In New Zealand, Bitcoin is a capital gains asset, and it's deliberate. In my mind, this is just my perspective, my opinion. In my view, it is deliberate to make people treat it in a particular way, because obviously the currency system doesn't want any competition, and people will behave in a certain way. It was very hard for me to get anybody to do a Lightning transaction with me in New Zealand, because the mental sort of weight that was there in terms of, oh, well, what about the tax implications? Straight away is the first thing that people say, even though it's like, well, what, for $5 over Lightning? Come on, get real, like, wake up. Don't be such a wuss. And then here in El Salvador, once we got here, that weight was gone. We're free. It's like, man, let's do Lightning transactions all day, every day, anywhere. It doesn't matter. Like, it's like exchanging cash. Like in my mind, it should be, because it's just like sending ones and zeros to each other. But we've just attributed value to it.
How has the quality of life changed from how you were living in New Zealand to El Salvador? You know, again, first world country to third world country, so there's a lot of misconceptions about, you're losing a lot of services, hospitals, doctors, transportation, security, fire, police. How has that been as far as your experience goes in year one?
There was definitely a culture shock, to be honest. Just with New Zealand is open, a beautiful open space, really green, mountains, green field. We don't have the big high walls with razor wire. We don't have security guys with guns. So we don't have tinted windows on cars. So those sorts of things were quite a big culture shock, and litter. And rubbish. When it comes to the other services, we live, maybe we are in a slight bubble here where we are in El Salvador. We have running water. We don't have hot water, but the temperature is so warm you don't need hot water. We have electricity. A supermarket's not that far down the road.
We're flushing toilets.
We're flushing toilets.
We basically live in a beautiful little bubble of condominium here. And I think one of the funny things for us that we've experienced is a lot of probably the poorer Salvadorans, when they see us, no, it's not even true. No. A lot of Salvadorans, when they see us, assume that we are incredibly rich and we have so much money. And that what's been funny for us is that we've had Salvadorans that blatantly have a lot more money than us judge us. in terms of they think we have a lot more money than them. And I'm sitting here going, I've never owned 5 cars in my life. You know, and a mansion with, and these guys they're earning a lot more money than I ever earned in New Zealand. And they're thinking just because we're foreigners and we've come here, we must be incredibly wealthy. And it's a really weird misconception. But the reason I mention that is because there's a lot of people that do have money here, and there's a lot of people who have access to very close to first world services because they have money here.
Absolutely. I mean, there's things like the roads and things, but again, Bukele seems to be really focusing on getting those roads fixed. And I mean, you were down in our Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, definitely, you know, you go down to the beaches and there's, you know, it's all dirt and muddy and things and potholes. That's all. I mean, we could go rural, far northland of New Zealand and you would find something similar, maybe not the tin shed type living quarters, but definitely, you know, infrastructure like that as well. We recently have been going up to Ilapango, to the lake up there, and we do have to go through Soyapango to get there. And so it's really resonated, or sort of, we have found that I realize that we are in quite a bubble down here at the beach where we are to being up in those areas up there. It's quite different. Really
highlighted the contrast.
Yeah. So, but because we haven't really been spending much time in those sorts of areas, we don't really notice it as much.
Now, I know here in the States too, and around the world, crime is talked about as rampant in El Salvador, and I know that Bukele has done a lot of work, basically declared war on the gangs down there, and has done a lot of good stuff to clean up the streets. How have you felt your safety to be down there, and the people that are within your circle? What kind of conversations are you having in that context when you go out at night?
We don't go out at night.
But not due to the safety. It's just because of our. Well, we were out. We do.
Like,
but
we go to Salsa and Bachata every Thursday evening, but you know, we know where we're going and we come home. And generally we don't feel unsafe when we go and interact in society. Like, we go to the local mercado to buy our fruit and some vegetables once a week. But it's not to say that we should become complacent, because there was one incident recently where someone said they were harassed walking home at night, and but otherwise generally
we don't. I haven't. Initially, when we first arrived, I was quite scared. To be honest, I was, we had to walk up to the supermarket in San Salvador where we were living, and it was just so different to what I'd ever experienced before. I was sort of standing very close to James and holding my bag, and I was quite, always sort of looking behind me. That lasted maybe a week and a half, and then once you start actually talking to the security guards and interacting with the people, you actually realize that everyone is really friendly, and they're really interested in you, because I mean there aren't many fair-skinned people here in El Salvador, so we are a bit of a different sort of
novelty.
And then since being down here at the beach, I haven't really at all felt unsafe. I mean, I'm quite happy to hop in the car and drive down to the supermarket or go to the mercados by myself. And when you go to the mercados, it's not just the street mercados. I'm going into the warehouse type scenario where they're really narrow walkways and they're cram packed full of people, and I don't have any problem there. I don't think anything of doing that.
One contrast I had when we visited down there in April was growing up, I grew up at 4,000 feet in the Sierra Nevadas of Northern California. And when you looked up at the night sky, you could actually see the Milky Way. And it was dark. I mean, dark, dark, dark. And then living down here in Southern California for the last 20 years, it's basically been, there's a term called light pollution, where there's so much light coming off of the Los Angeles skyline that it actually reflects off the particles in the sky, and you don't see any stars at all. And so it's very rare that things will be very, very dark. And then going back to El Salvador and being in a really dark environment again, it takes a little bit of acclimating to that change in light. Along with like kind of what you were saying with the idea of feeling safe. I asked that question and you gave a really great response, but then I had to kind of remind myself that, well, living in Los Angeles or any big city, there's always going to be those individuals out there, no matter how safe a place is, that have bad intentions at heart and who are always looking for a target. So no matter how safe something is, you should always keep your head on a swivel and keep your wits about you, like you were saying, James. So it totally makes sense. And I want to point that out so people don't think that there is a fear factor down there. That the fear factor, it sounds like you're explaining, is the same fear factor that everybody should be keeping themselves aware of wherever they go.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Even in our hometown,
yes.
like I was, occasionally we would walk home in the evening because, we live reasonably close, but I was cautious. Like I didn't trust the people in our hometown. There was still weird people out there that were going to do weird things, and I had to be on guard. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Let's change to a lighter topic here. One of the things that I also wanted to touch base on of your experience down in El Salvador is how the adoption of Bitcoin has been down there, because it became legal tender in September of 2021, and then we were there 6 months later, and we had some orange pill stories. My wife was actually able to orange pill a vendor on a beach who was trying to sell handmade purses, and my wife wanted to pay Bitcoin for it, and they didn't accept Bitcoin, and the vendor was like, well, I only take cash, and we're like, we don't have cash, so we couldn't buy it from him. But then my wife went over to another vendor who was selling jewelry, and my son wanted a necklace, so she bought him a necklace, and he took Strike. Use the Strike app to send dollars through the Bitcoin network to him. And then the guy who sold purses noticed this transaction happen. And then after my wife and son left, he went up to the vendor and was like, I couldn't sell her anything. How did you get to buy it? And he basically orange pilled this other vendor to where he downloaded the app on his phone and then came back to my wife and said, do you want to buy it now? And she said, yeah, sure, fine, I'll buy it now.
Yeah,
right.
Awesome. We love those stories.
Yeah. It is. We
They're
do.
The best.
Yes.
We do similar things here, and sure, adoption isn't 100% and it's not perfect, but I think Nicki's probably got one of the best sort of explanations, is that everybody's cautious of their government.
Yeah.
And when the government rolls things out, of course, I mean, if they tell you this is the single source of truth, you should probably ask some questions. But I think what's awesome about El Salvador is that they give people the option. You don't have to, like, you can still accept Bitcoin, but convert it to dollars straight away. That's the beauty of the Chivo app. So you have the choice to continue receiving dollars, even though I want to use Bitcoin as a payment rail. And we've had a lot of experiences with people where, for example, at the beach restaurant that comes with where we live, they don't accept Bitcoin. But we say to the staff, we'd love to tip you. Do you have a Bitcoin wallet? And they're like, no. And it's like, well, get a Bitcoin wallet. It's free. Download it. And then sometimes they come back with Chivo. Sometimes they come back with Bitcoin Beach. And then we tip them $1. Now, the next time we go, we get a different staff member and we're like, can we please tip you in Bitcoin? And he's like, yep. And because what's happened is the other staff member has already told him, get the wallet. And when you see these guys, they'll tip you in Bitcoin. And so you do these little fun gestures with people, and part of it is making it fun for them, and they start to spread the word. And it's that usage, it's that awareness, it's seeing that it works, it's seeing that it, people want to use it with you, and
and it's so fast, because we'll go to the Mercados and have $10 or $20, and they. And they're not accepting Bitcoin, and what will end up happening is they'll have to go run around all the vendors to get change, and then they'll come back, and by that stage we could have actually paid them so quickly. And I mean we're very much a slow approach with a lot of people, because we don't want to come in and go, oh, this is what you need to be doing. We just like to build relationships with people and sort of start educating, start talking to them about it, and so they can get an understanding. And my first Bitcoin and what they're doing is amazing. And also the Bitcoin Beach, Hope House and the school. So the education that they're doing. And I think we're also trying to sort of say, well, if you can't go along to any of these, then you can actually download the diploma now, and you can actually, and it's in Spanish, and they can do it themselves at home.
Yeah.
It's just so if they want to start learning more and understanding more, which is good. So yeah.
It's awesome.
From a utility standpoint and from like an infrastructure standpoint, have you noticed a change in the amount of new construction projects or new development projects or rehabilitation projects that are starting to take place in the country?
It's hard for us to necessarily say or know that, because we don't really get around.
Yeah, I am nodding my head.
Yeah, I know. we haven't really had the experience. But I would definitely say money's being spent on buildings.
Yeah.
Like even here, like we've literally got.
I'm going to say where we are on the other side of the fence, there has been 6 houses getting built. And they're not small homes.
No, no joke
at all. And just next door, across the road from us, there's an extension getting built.
And a complete renovation.
And a complete renovation at the end, like massive. And so that's pretty big. And then in the city, you've got cranes, there's high rises getting built. He's still working on, he's got plans for the rest of the Surf City highway to go from La Libertad through to El Zonte, and they're already starting to dig and move poles. And the city, all the infrastructure of the roads in the city, it's massive.
Yep.
It's
Surf City Highway 2 down in Bitcoin City area.
Yeah, and La Playa Flores through to Puente Mango and past it, they've already started digging that up.
We were down there and saw them starting to work on it, and then this week Bukele's gone and released drone footage of that actually happening. And then there's actually a lot of infrastructure projects that you don't actually hear about. So there's a hydro plant being built up by the
border of either Honduras or Guatemala.
Yeah, and in the northwest border, there's a hydro plant being built there, and it's not being talked about. But that's because Bukele likes to talk about it once it's done, not make promises. He likes to deliver. And there's other projects like that are around that are being worked on, and he wants to deliver.
Yeah.
I'm getting the sense that you don't think that he's a dictator like a lot of the traditional news media would portray him.
No. We don't, but it's really interesting because, of course, we also have conversations with people who want to tell us that he is, and unfortunately we haven't really had a good chance to really draw out why people think that. And if I was going to give you a short answer on why people say that, is because the traumatic history of this region is that these people will often come in and promise the world, and then eventually they turn out to be a dictator. So I can understand the historical trauma that people who don't trust him have, and I don't blame them. Fair enough. And that's the thing, is if it turned sour here, we need to be mentally and physically prepared for that. It's just the way it is. But for now, things seem good.
Yeah. And I also believe in what we're seeing here. There's so many positive things. Yes, there's, there is one part that's not so positive, but what we see, majority of what we're seeing is really positive. The people the Salvadorans we're talking to are, they don't, all of a sudden, they're not having to pay their taxes to the gangs anymore. So they've got another day's wage that they can spend on their family, so, they're able to open more, they're able to do more. They're not in fear. And we're definitely seeing that.
And there's a lot of people who are grateful for the business that's coming into the country, like tour guides and people who own and rent houses. They're very helpful and thankful for all the foreign people that are coming in and the money that's coming in. I mean, a lot of people have got lots of good things to say about what's happening here. Locals have got a lot of good things to say about what's happening here.
How's when we were down there in April, there was a lot of Bitcoiners coming in from all over the world to Bitcoin Beach and to the different Bitcoin events that took place there. Are you still noticing the same amount of traffic from the Bitcoin world community coming into El Salvador? Or do you think is it being talked about as kind of a seasonal thing? Or how are you guys still staying busy talking with new Bitcoiners in country?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. And again, I mean, we did have Bitcoin conference in November, and of course that brought in so many people. It was incredible. And a lot of people didn't just come and stay for a week. They stayed, a lot of people actually extended their stay.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe, because they were actually quite nervous to come, and they didn't realize. So once they got here, they were going, oh my gosh, we're extending. And they were extending their stay to stay longer, so they could go visit more, they could see more, they could experience it more. And they're all saying they're coming back. It was actually really amazing.
Yeah.
And the meetups, the Bitcoin Beach meetup, we've got one this Friday. So we're looking forward to that, because it's been well over a month since the last one. So every time we go to that, there's new people.
Yep.
Always new people.
Yep.
And which is wonderful as well.
So
yeah.
We've noticed the seasonal drop and starting to gain in tourists, because we go to a tourist hotel in Zonte to dance. So we see them there.
Yeah.
But as Nicki said, we're also noticing the new Bitcoiners that are either coming to stay for months to check it out. There are people who are definitely still coming to live. And there was a family recently, they're just digital nomads, and they're putting this on their regular what do you call it, like routine of rotation, because they want to be part of what's happening here, and they see the bright future. They just deliberately make sure they're always moving.
Cool. Now, if I remember right, you guys have your permanent residency card in El Salvador now, correct?
We've got our 1 year temporary.
Temporary, okay.
So that's for 1 year. That will come back up for renewal in May 2023. And all we've got to do is fill some papers and sign it and send it in, apparently. So,
And what does that allow you to work in El Salvador, or just to stay?
We've got one that allows us to work remotely.
Yeah.
No problem.
The visa we actually got was setting up a company. So we got it through so we got our residency through setting up a company here in El Salvador.
Okay. What kind of company is that? What are you doing?
It's basically doesn't really do anything at the moment. So we've got it, and we want to start putting things like our YouTube revenue through it. So we're going through the painful process, and we're learning a lot in the process of we take it for granted that mail works in the first world.
Actually, that is one thing that we have noticed in regards to first world to third world. In that sense, is postal system's not great if you're not in the main center. Because
we've had an unfortunate experience with it. Some people have had a fine experience with it, one that they're willing to put up with based on being in a third world. But anyway, with the business, we want to be earning income and putting it through it here to contribute. It's just it's good exercise.
So what we will be doing, I mean, as James said, it's the YouTube fundings that will go in it, but also we are creating some educational material that we are hoping will create an income stream as well.
And we want to set up more of our profiles to be coming through there. We actually work full-time on our income remotely, and then all of the Bitcoin stuff that we do is in our own time, and it takes up a huge amount of our time these days. And it's like YouTubing. It's not just YouTube and Twitter. We actually go out and we network with a lot of people. So we go to a lot of meetups where we can. We try to go to events that we can. We go and investigate what's actually happening in the community. One of the best, we've got a number of great stories with the coffee, and then there was one with News Story. If you don't know about the News Story charity, that is awesome. They're putting together all sorts of pieces.
What is that? I'm not familiar with it.
News Story. It's a charity, a non-profit organization that helps people who live in uninhabitable homes get into a habitable home. And so they have got they had places in El Salvador which they were working on. They've now come in and they're working with the Bitcoin Beach, or the Hope House, should I say, and they have got some land just behind El Zonte, up in the farmland, and they're building homes for people who are living in uninhabitable homes. Now, these people, or what they're doing is the people have to pay for the materials not the actual value of the land and the house itself. So the homes are costing about $10,000 for people to get into, and they're able to pay for their mortgage with Bitcoin. And so that's what they're getting educated on. They also have a company called People, or a community organization called People Working for People, People Helping People. And so they're also involved in teaching them about finances, teaching them about life skills, because a lot of these people didn't have a house that had three rooms, a kitchen inside, a bathroom inside. And so they need to sort of understand how that all works. And it's a great story, and they're working with Bitrefill to actually help pay for the mortgages and manage these Bitcoin mortgages.
Cool. Wonderful.
Yeah, but they're an interest-free mortgage, which is great, and they have it over a 13-year time frame.
13 years interest-free mortgage.
Yeah, I know.
We need more of that.
Yeah, it's really great. So we will be having a video coming out about that in the not too distant future. So yeah, it's just I think it's just wonderful what they're trying to do and working with Bitcoin. And so the people, it's everyone's getting that education on it, and they're getting support through the whole 13 years. They're getting people are there to help them and support them. Yeah.
Great. So now that you've been in El Salvador for 10 months, how has the conversations changed with your families back in New Zealand? Has anybody come out to visit you? Anybody bought Bitcoin?
Well, you've got family members already in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'd already orange pilled everyone I could orange pill before I left.
Yeah. I have my two sons are very much in the government and work for the government. One son did download the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and that's as far as he got. And then I have a sister who sort of got, I think, burnt a little bit by a few altcoins, and she never bought Bitcoin. And I haven't really had at this point to talk to them about it, to be honest. I have mentioned, I think on one post I said, you guys, you need to get at least something, buy some. I think it's really important. But nobody came back to me on that one.
No, it's a bit of a hard topic when Nicki goes and meets some guy who's into magic internet money and wants to take it to the most dangerous country in the world to go and do magic internet money. So
yeah, and it doesn't help with when you have bad actors in this space, like most recently Sam Bankman-Fried. That really, everything that he did had nothing to do with Bitcoin, but somehow Bitcoin got lumped into the same pile of garbage of all of the other shit coins that were out there that he stole from people. Really.
And it's I had a brief chat with my New Zealand parents family side this week, and they mentioned FTX, and I said, just got to remember that it was actually the fault of nothing to do with cryptocurrency. That was the fault. It was a scam by people who were basically greedy, and it went to very high levels of people that were meant to actually be stopping things like this from happening. So don't confuse human greed with technology. It's
Yeah. One of the things that you guys have touched on a couple of times with, transacting in Bitcoin, which is really such a world-changing event, is what gets lost in that conversation is that people think, well, I use my credit card all the time. What's the difference? And they don't realize it's the difference. When you use your credit card, it's a debt-based asset where the money doesn't physically transfer from your account into the retailer's account per se. A loan is generated that's put into the retail investor's account, and then the bank is basically paid off through your money to make the situation whole. It's not that in Bitcoin, that dollar is transacting from one place to another, so value is physically leaving and being collected someplace else. And in this case, it's being collected down in El Salvador. And we in first world countries get caught up in the instantaneous nature of wanting things now, and things need to be now. And it's not until you look back over a period of time that you realize how quickly things happened. I mean, from Bukele saying that he was going to create make Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador at the 2020 Bitcoin conference to actually, 8 months later, making it actual legal tender in the country, to now people from all over the world like yourselves are flooding into the country and bringing their wealth with them, which has second and third effects on the populations, the circles of people that you interact with and the circles of people that they interact with, that not only change the hearts and minds of those individuals, but also can create wealth to make future generations prosper in the country. And then because of what's happening there, you're seeing Bitcoin towns pop up in Guatemala and Honduras and a lot of the other Central American countries down there too. And even though we have people up here like Elizabeth Warren who keep talking continuously about how Bitcoin is bad and how we need a central bank digital currency that provides surveillance technologies to help Americans be freer, or help world participants in the dollar system be freer and have more access. It's really just the opposite there. So it's cool to see you guys as early adopters really kind of putting your money and putting your life where your minds and hearts are, to help really push forward a technology in a way of life that more and more people need to do and experience. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and on the subject initially of just it wasn't until we arrived here, well, this is for me, once we arrived here and started using the Lightning Network, did I realize how powerful it was. It wasn't until I was here that I was actually buying money and going, this is cash, pretty much what the Lightning Network is. There's no intermediary person. There's, all I'm doing is from my wallet to their wallet, and you saw it happen. Was what going, this is great. And then the sending of the money from New Zealand to El Salvador, and in the sense that we weren't having to go through a bank to do that, that platform of the blockchain, of just taking our money with us, was very powerful. Yeah.
We've been talking for almost an hour here, and so one thing I would be remiss if I didn't ask is, this podcast is really about helping everybody get more educated about Bitcoin, but also helping people who are a little bit later in life become more comfortable with the idea of the technology and how it can be an important part of their arsenal when buying and selling things with other people, or storing money in an asset that could accumulate in value over time, could be part of their retirement, could be part of just a movable asset from one place to another, could be used as collateral down the road. What would be one piece of advice that you would say to somebody who's later in life, who's maybe on the fence or a little skeptical about Bitcoin, to help point them in the right direction of giving it a more harder look?
Oh, that's really hard, because everybody is different, has a different trigger point. And I guess it depends on where people are at on their personal journeys. And it sounds deep and philosophical, but money is important. It's a life force, it's a life energy in a way, but it's also a vote for a lot of things in society. There's a few, spend $100 and learn. If it all goes well, you come out with $100 of Bitcoin and you learn something. If it all goes wrong, you learn something.
And I are going to, there's a couple of people we've spoken to here who are, sort of, I'd be going late 60s, and they weren't great savers. And they said, but once they went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, they actually realized with Bitcoin, the value of holding it. And so they have not, they've been, any spare money, rather than spending it, they're actually saving it in Bitcoin. And so that's sort of been something that's been really interesting, in the sense that they've sort of gone, it's so important to have some money saved in Bitcoin, and then, or is that the right word? I might be wrong terminology there, but so again, it's learning with that, $100, and then once you sort of get that benefit, but you need to make sure that you have got already put all the processes in place to make sure that it's secure, and then you will find that you're going, hey, this is quite interesting. And you start going down that rabbit hole, you will start, putting more aside.
One of my concerns about, and it's quite common, a lot of people overcomplicate Bitcoin. And this is why we love the Lightning Network, because you can go get, for example, the Moon wallet, download it for free. You can back up your keys and have full self-sovereignty. But I just want to start that again. The best experience that we often give people is downloading a free open source wallet and sending them 5,000 sats. It can all be done in under 5 minutes. And that experience often blows people's minds, how fast, quick, easy, like low friction it was. Now we're basically talking about onboarding here, and that may be a different stage. People may be looking for why they should go down the hole further or longer, or looking at it. And I actually had an explanation today. Like, I had somebody ask me this question: how much should I invest? I'm like, well, that's something you got to sit down and you got to think about. But my brother and myself, we sat down and started running numbers, and we said, well, if we bought 1% of, if you go and spend 1% of your net worth, and Bitcoin goes in 10x's, and you got to also have an understanding or a belief or some sort of structure that it may go to these prices, and maybe a strategy out, and run through these things. Do you want me? Sorry, you look like you.
No. Go ahead. I'm listening. I'm just thinking about how it's so commonly heard as the asymmetric bet in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The positive upside is so much greater than the downside risk.
Yeah.
At like a 1% allocation to your portfolio, like you're talking about.
Exactly. But I sometimes wonder if, like, people who are looking for a reason, that might just go over their head. Like, it doesn't really mean a lot. The quite technical words. And I think people need to sit down with a spreadsheet and just run some numbers, and where you think Bitcoin could go if you put 1% in versus 10% in, because that if you put 10% of your net worth of savings in now, and Bitcoin 10x's, it goes in, I think it's 10x's your net value. And I don't think a fiat portfolio is necessarily going to do that quickly. It's just interesting. It's an interesting experiment to go down. It depends on how much people are involved in their money. But Michael Saylor is also an amazing resource to listen to about why people might want to be involved in Bitcoin as an asset class. Because if you want to get up and move for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be tyranny. It could be just because you want to change in life. Bitcoin allows you to do all sorts of things much more fluidly than a lot of other assets.
All right. On that topic, for one last deep question here: why Bitcoin over any other altcoin?
Oh. Yeah, this is another deep philosophical question.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. My easy answer: if you have children, your kids are gonna do drugs or have sex. So the best thing to do is to teach them how to do drugs or have sex in a responsible way. And if you're going to get involved in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, I always recommend people, look, sit down, learn what Bitcoin is, buy some Bitcoin, experience Bitcoin, understand how it works. Once you've done that, then do the same for, I don't care which altcoin you choose, but when you do it, you'll realize that it's different. But I want you to do it in a responsible way. So start with Bitcoin, because I've already put time and research in, and I'm very confident that this is one of the better ways to do it. And then go, okay, sure, I'll take 10% of my portfolio of Bitcoin. So if you only buy $1,000, you can take $100 and go buy Dogecoin and see what happens. Just experiment. Go buy, there's so many. I mean, Dogecoin is probably one of the better experiences than some of the other.
I absolutely love your answer. It's one of the best answers that I've heard. If you don't mind, I'm gonna bring it into my own repertoire of things that I use when I talk to people, because as with like the Dogecoin or the Ethereum or the Stellar or the XRP, Ripple, type stuff, what I find is people buy Bitcoin, then they buy those other things. They end up either one of two things: the price goes up a lot and they sell it, and then they don't have any, and they have this great story about how they gambled on red and they won big, or they end up doing the research, realizing that it isn't what they thought they were doing, and they sell it at a loss and take that loss and they buy Bitcoin back with it.
Yep. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've got friends in both camps. I got friends who are like, James, we just want to buy it as an investment. How do we do it? Set them up with basically their own cold storage, and they buy it and they're happy and they're done. It's real easy. And then I've got other friends who'll come along and go, James, what should I buy? And I don't always realize they're asking for investment advice. What should I buy? And I'm like, Bitcoin, just buy Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And they go away and they come back whatever time frame later. And I'm like, oh, did you ever buy Bitcoin? And they're like, yeah, I went and just bought Shiba Inu coin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're serious. You know, and it's like they've gone and put a huge chunk of their life savings in it. And I'm just like, why? Like, I never even mentioned like anything on another chain. How did you get there? I don't like, it's not easy for them to get there, but somehow they did it, even though the most experienced person they asked never even hinted at that. It's weird.
Yeah, what's crazy in this last cycle versus the one before it, in the 2017 cycle, it was all about the ICO craze. So people were be able to, these companies that didn't have any value, didn't have any software engineers, didn't have any network effects, but had great marketing campaigns based on free venture capitalist money, were able to entice these people into buying these coins and getting airdrops and everything else. And as soon as they were posted on an exchange, then that provided a trading platform for these coins to start being traded on, and the price doubled, tripled, quadrupled in a couple of days. And then they sold, and then everybody always talks about their winners, right? But nobody ever talks about their losers. And so once that mania kind of finally fizzled out and everybody realized that there was no there with any of these corporations, the entire thing collapsed, which then meant that people were using leverage on Binance and other things and had these margin calls and had to sell, in times like that, they had to sell what they had, not what they wanted to sell, which happened to be Bitcoin, which brought down Bitcoin that last time. Now in this last cycle, we've seen it with yield farming. So now you have all these platforms out there that were giving 7, 12, 20. I think one time, even right now, there's a coin out there that's giving like 50% yield with month over month payments. And it's like, how this can't, they're enticing people into this because our money is so broken. And if you put your money in a savings account, you're going to get 0% on it. So people are just looking for a way, when they know inflation is 15% in their world, they're looking for a way just to hold that purchasing power. And so there's these scammers out there who are using that to their benefit to then gain liquidity into their shit tokens to boost the price up. And then they do a whole bunch of pre-mine, the price boosts up, they sell all their stuff, the market falls out, and then everybody's left holding the bag. And so now we're here where we're at now. And it was with Genesis and Voyager and Celsius and BlockFi and Gemini, perhaps, and maybe Binance. I mean, are we done with this? Who knows? But it seems like there's never a shortage of people who are looking for that quick buck, where if they would have just followed your advice and just bought Bitcoin and done the research on Bitcoin, learned about the technology, learned about cryptocurrency from those who started it, the cypherpunks and Satoshi Nakamoto, and that genre of cryptographer, and then learned about Ethereum and the other shit coins that are built on top of it, they would have quickly recognized the red flags and where the value proposition really was. And the value proposition was on the side of the founders, not on the investors, with all of those other coins, where with Bitcoin, it's the reverse. It's with the investors. It's not with the founders, because Satoshi left us his technology, this beautiful piece of work, and then disappeared, and nobody knows where he is, and he's never transacted a single coin in his portfolio. And it's all open source code where anybody can verify it and prove that what's yours in your wallet is yours in your wealth and not in somebody else's, and nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
So sorry for
sounds like you've been down the rabbit hole.
just a little bit. With that, I'd like to wrap it up. It sounds like your advice is quintessential, which is just buy a little bit, no matter how much it is, and get started and start your educational process into Bitcoin.
Well, it's even simpler than that. It's download a Lightning wallet and do a transaction with somebody. Like, you don't have to buy Bitcoin. Like, you just have to find somebody who's got a Lightning wallet. And I mean, it's a great experience. And you don't, because I think a lot of people have got this preconceived idea that it's technical and it's difficult and you got to, all these security concerns, and that's all real and valid, but it doesn't have to be that way. Lightning's changed the game.
Yeah. It's no different than using Venmo on your phone, which is a common banking service here in the States. That at first is just like a Moon wallet or something like that, or a Lightning wallet in general. So if people want to reach, go ahead, Nikki.
I said it's like it's borderless. Like I had a client ring the other evening, and he sort of said, "Well, what exactly are you doing in El Salvador?" And he was sort of asking, and so we sort of talked a little bit about Bitcoin, and he goes, "Well, I don't really understand it." And I said, "Look, I was going to show you how easy it is." And I said, "Get on this." We were on the phone. I said, "Download the Bitcoin Beach wallet." And he did that, and I sent him some, and he sent me his QR code, and I sent him some sats, and he was going. And it was instant, So this is from El Salvador to New Zealand, where you were transferring that the Bitcoin across, and he was like, "What?" He was like really blown away, and he said, "Well, when we move house, I'm going to call you because I need to know more." So
No, and the thing is he didn't have to sign up for any KYC or anything like that. It was just we sent him money.
I've used that story with when my son was younger, he had a nanny, and for the first 2 years while Frida and I worked, she was looking after him, and she was from the Ukraine and still has her daughter and 2 grandchildren's and son back there in Kiev. And when Russia rolled their tanks across the border and everybody was trying to get out, we helped her set up a wallet and showed her how to transfer money to the Ukraine in real time, so that if her daughter needed it, she had access to help if and when. Luckily, she didn't need it, but now we just saw our nanny, Natasha is her name, maybe a couple months ago, and she still had that Bitcoin on the wallet, and we were able to talk to her about it and see how it was going, and help her learn how to sign into it, and helped her understand the importance of understanding don't lose your password because you could lose it forever, kind of stuff. And she ended up buying more Bitcoin because of that value. And then I was talking with other people who had family in Russia, and not because they were part of the military or part of the government, or they're just normal people over there, and their entire banking services get cut off from them, and now all of a sudden they can't buy groceries. And people who are here talking to Russians who have family there, helping them set up wallets so that they could send money to them so that they could eat. So it really is a technology for the people. And no longer do governments really have a way to stop the people from trying to live their best experience here on Earth with the short amount of time we all are here.
Absolutely.
So how do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you, if they're coming to El Salvador, if they have questions about how to get started? James and Nikki, you guys are incredible resources for the Bitcoin community. Help people get involved with you.
So social handles are NJ, so Nicki James, NJ El Salvador. So you can find us on twitter.com/NJ El Salvador, youtube.com/NJ El Salvador, and we're on Instagram as well. Twitter, we're I'm active most of the time. YouTube, we put up as much content as we can to help people. There's plenty of information on there on all sorts of bits and pieces. And we're busy on our website trying to put together some basics to help people get on board from password managers up, because we think that's really important.
Fantastic. Well, I had a great time talking with you. I got to experience another El Salvadorian sunset, which I'm sorry you guys didn't see because you were looking at me. But if you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you guys so much for being part of the show. Once again, this is Chris with Wisdom Through Bitcoin podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And if you have any questions of Nicki and James, reach out to them on Twitter. You can find their contact information in the show notes. And with that, we'll call it there.
Right. Hey, thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. That's great.
Thank you. Hold on, guys.